When we started catching them on a regular basis, I used to tell my clients, give your crappie to your neighbors and keep the walleye for yourself. And you would never be giving away crappie.
No, never.
But if the walleye bite is on,
yeah,
walleye are very much in tune to scents. It's very unique. It's a slow presentation swim bait. You just smear that in that ribbon, and it stays a long time.
What is the most common mistake you see people make? They could do this maybe one thing differently and they'll improve their success.
Walleye are in, and this is a secret that probably a lot of people that if they watch it and their guides are probably going, shush up. Mm-hmm. But
in the Ozarks, people have always lived in rhythm with the natural world. Hunting, fishing, living off the land aren't just things we like to do, it's who we are. And though our lives are inextricably linked to the land we live on, today, we've never been more disconnected from it. So join us as we travel across the region, bringing you the voices of the Ozarks, deepen our connection to the land, sharpen our skills in the outdoors, and learn what it means to be an Ozarker. Welcome back to the Ozark Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Veet, joined as always by co-host of the show and my good buddy, Kyle Plunkett.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Doing good.
Man, we've got a fun episode for you guys today. And this one actually is cool because it was recommended to us by a listener. And he reached out to us, and his name is Cameron Fisher. So Cameron, thank you for reaching out. Cameron hit us up the other day and said, man, I've got an idea for a guest. This is a guide I've been fishing with. He's super, super knowledgeable, great guy. Just love talking to him, and he's all about education. He's all about teaching, and he's on Beaver Lake, which is really close to home for us. And so our guest today is Jon Conklin of FishOn Guide Service. And Jon, thanks for having us to your house, and thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. I love, as we talked earlier, I love teaching, and this is special for me, so
yeah,
happy to be here.
You mentioned that's kind of what separates you, or something that you really like to hone in on, is not just taking people out on guide trips, but really teaching them how to do it for themselves and kind of the why behind everything, right?
Yeah, and the reason why I do that is because, if somebody didn't take me under their wing and teach me how to fish, I would be out there struggling just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. So I'm 63 years old. I've kind of decided that my calling now is to teach fishing instead of just putting fish in the boat. And one of the things with guide trips is you're on point and expected to catch whatever the limit is. So be it 3 stripers or 15 crappie, you got 3 people on there with 15 crappie, they want to catch 45 crappie.
Yeah.
And what you run to on Beaver, and you and I have talked about this a little bit before, is Beaver's a tough lake. There's times where you can, catch them at will, but 90% of the time, you better have a bunch of arrows in your quiver and understand what you're doing and why the fish are where they're at and why they're acting the way that they are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that philosophy because it's really easy to go out with somebody and, catch fish, but not really know why. And the guy does everything for you. And he doesn't explain what's going on. And then, down the road, you want to go out and do it, but you don't remember exactly. And you go out and you get skunked. And there's nothing worse than getting skunked. So it's great that the philosophy you have behind it. I really like it.
Well, and, anybody that's fished striper on Beaver, they're going to, if they're honest, we all get skunked. Mm-hmm. This is not, I tell people, this is not Lake Texoma where you can go down there and catch 50 stripers a day. This is a trophy lake. So I've learned instead of making excuses, I said, you know what? Why don't I charge a little bit less? Tell them it's not a freezer filler trip. Mm-hmm. And let me teach you something that you can teach your kids or somebody that you know. Because if we don't pass down, you guys are big hunters. If you don't pass this down, we're going to lose it. Mm-hmm. Because there's enough people out there that want to stop hunting. And there's enough people out there that are against fishing, and it's important. We're the conservationists, the hunters and the fishermen. So I think it's important to educate people and give them some skills that they're not afraid to take their kid. I run into parents all the time. Say, I really would like to get a boat, but I don't even know how to tie a hook or back a trailer down. So I, just by talking to people, there's a need for someone to teach because not everybody, we're getting in the generations now. Yes. Back, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, all granddads and, dads hunted and fished, but nowadays they're working and they're not taking the kids out and the kids are glued to devices. And so I think it's imperative to get kids outdoors.
Yeah.
And to do that, you got to give the parents some confidence that they're not going to look, to their kids
look
like they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So John, I know you're not actually from the Ozarks. You've been here for a long time, but you're originally from Wisconsin. You moved down here, like 30 years ago?
Yeah, but we don't tell people that.
We don't tell people that you're a secret Yankee, a closet Yankee over here.
Yeah, I moved to Goshen, and how we got out here is my brother got hired as the city planner for the city of Fayetteville. And so he got out here, and it was 1991, I believe, or 92, and he said, "You've got to come check this place out."
Yeah.
So that's when we moved here, and I'm glad I did, and love it.
Yeah. Well, I bring it up because on this episode, we're going to be talking about walleye.
Right.
And walleye is such a cool fish. And I think what's cool about it is two things for me, at least. One is not everybody knows that we even have walleye here. People think of it as a northern fish. And you being from Wisconsin, that's just kind of probably what people in Wisconsin.
It's in my DNA.
Yeah, it's like what people do. And then the second thing that I love about walleye is they taste so good.
Yeah, eating them.
It's like that and crappie to me are neck and neck. I mean, I think those are probably the two best fish you can get around here.
Yeah, and when we'll go back to when they started putting them in, but when we started catching them on a regular basis, I used to tell my clients, give your crappie to your neighbors and keep the walleye for yourself. And you would never be giving away crappie.
No, never.
But if the walleye bite is on, that's the fish to eat.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to say something controversial here. I think walleye tastes better than crappie.
I do too.
From the stuff that I've had, and I also like the fact that you can take out that little cheek.
Yep.
And you can kind of have that freshwater scallop.
Yep.
Dude, it's so good. It's just a unique fish, and I've had crappie so much. It's kind of just like, this is a special thing when I get to taste some walleye.
It is, and because of that, I guide, for stripers, walleye, and crappie.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the fact that the fish are relatively new to the area. Now, this kind of gets off on what we were talking about earlier about when they were in the White River system.
Right. They are native.
But when they dammed the lake, they just didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 2002, they did some stockings. Around 2007, 2008, they did some major stockings, upwards of 2.5 million, 3 million fry per year. And so they got into the system, and really no one knew how to catch them.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, because the fact that they're so good to eat, people are grasping any knowledge they can get on how do you put those fish in the freezer.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit now, kind of getting into it. Moving down here, and like we said, you've been here for a while, but you kind of had a leg up on people when they started stocking really heavily and understanding, not just the spawn, but year round. And so we'll talk about that. But before we get to that, maybe just kind of explain a little bit of behaviors of walleye, and that seasonal trend. When is the spawning season, and what can kind of people expect to see of just how these fish act? Yeah,
that's an interesting question. And what I wanted to do on this, as we talked when we were going to do this podcast, is really give out some information that's going to me teaching. We're not on the boat, but I'm going to be teaching on the podcast.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people don't understand about walleye is we'll start with the spawn. everybody can catch one accidentally during the spawn.
Yep.
We've done that.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, you're a hero, man.
Really, really good at that, actually. Accidentally catching them when I'm catching white bass.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people do, and more power to you. And that's congratulations, because it's a good dinner. But anyways, the walleye. So we'll start there. Walleye are in, and this is a secret that probably a lot of people that if they watch it and their guides are probably going shush up. But I'm getting up there. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag.
Let it out, man.
And hopefully I run into somebody that says, hey, man, you really helped me out. So the spawn is the one that everybody that doesn't know how to catch them, if you go down to Twin Bridges or you go down below Beaver Dam, you're going to inevitably catch one just by accident. If you're trolling a crankbait or something like that. The biggest thing I can tell people is we catch walleye pretty much year in and year out on the pre-spawn movement up into the rivers. If you've got a mild January, you can catch walleye, and you can catch them from where Blue Springs is, from Blue Springs all the way up to the 45 bridge.
Let me ask you this, just not to cut you off too bad, but you're talking specifically about beaver, but across the Ozarks, we got people up in Missouri listening. We got people over in North Arkansas. Are they pretty well the same patterns where they're moving up into the river, or they're above it, or they're below it?
They're very similar.
Yeah.
On Bull Shoals, they run up to the Power Site Dam. On Table Rock, they run up to the James River and the Kings River. And what they'll do is they'll stage up. So they'll come up into and I write my reports for the Game and Fish. So a lot of times people ask me, what are the river arms? Well, we have the War Eagle arm. We have the white arm. The white arm has a lot more walleye in it. For why, I have no idea. I don't know if the bottom's better for spawning or it's not as silted, or some reason we catch a lot more walleye on the white. But they'll come in and stage. So if you go to Table Rock, you're going to go around Holiday Island. You're going to look in 25 to 30 feet of water. They'll stage up in the middle of 1st of January. And then they'll wait for that water temperature to hit. And the magic number is 50. When that water gets to 50, those fish are on the move, and that's when they're spawning. So it's on on those lakes, it's the same. Now, if you go into Wisconsin or Minnesota or North Dakota, it's a lot different, and it's a lot later because you're iced. You got hard water, which is frozen lakes. So it's after the ice out. But it's very similar. Now, when you get into North Dakota and these lakes in Minnesota and Lake of the Woods and Mille Lacs, those are bull lakes. They don't have a lot of water flowing in like we do here. So it's a little different. Now, on that point, and you'll have to keep me focused. The walleye don't all spawn in the White River. Now I'm talking on the beaver side of the dam. They don't all spawn on the War Eagle or the White. They spawn on the riprap of the dam. They spawn on the south-facing pea gravel banks, such as Lost Bridge area. You find a pea gravel bank that faces south and gets that direct sunlight and gets some wave lapping. They'll actually, and I've caught them up there around the islands at Prairie Creek. It's not just in the rivers. So that's your main thing. But the thing I would say to people is, don't cut yourself short. When it's January, walleye are cold water spawners. It's the first fish to spawn in the White River system up here. You get the walleye. You got a lot of spoonbill that come up. If you have live scope, which I do on my boats, you can see a lot of spoonbill in there. The walleye come up. Then you got the white bass, and that's the way it progresses. The walleye, the magic number again is about 50. But when that water's 40, they're piling up somewhere between Hickory Creek and Blue Springs. So you have to use your electronics and look for those groups of fish, okay?
And explain staging for people who may not know what that term means when it comes to pre-spawn and spawn behavior.
So on a pre-spawn, the fish know where they're going to go. And this is good for anything: bass, white bass, walleye.
They know where they're going to go because of the spawning conditions, right?
Yes.
The structure and the gravel, like what they're looking for ideal.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so they find these, and I'm not sure. I mean, we talk about it a lot. Do they learn that? Is that learned behavior? Is it genetic behavior?
Yeah.
I don't know. You can't have a conversation with one of them, but it seems like the river walleye, the initial stockings came from the Kings River. So they were a river walleye. And probably it's in their DNA to run upstream. Now, most fish, I know some fisheries biologists pretty well, they have a tendency, and I don't know what the term is, there's a term for it. When there's water coming into the lake, fish have a tendency to move up the river. So what we look for is on that pre-spawn, there's a couple things that I do as a guide. I use my computer that help a lot. One of them is, and we can show this later on, it's a website, it's USGS, and you push into your computer on your browser, USGS, gauges near Fayetteville, Arkansas. And that they have water gauges there. And in this one particular one, there's numerous ones. There's one on the War Eagle by Hinesville. There's one on right here in Fayetteville, which is by Wyman Bridge. And what that does is I use that every day. And if you look that up, that is a point that I use that probably more than anything to know when to start looking for the fish. Because what happens on the, we're talking a lot about the pre-spawn and the spawn. Because the river is shallow, it cools off much faster. So like the brutal Arctic air we had, it put a stop on the walleye coming up. I mean, it went from 52-degree water down to 33 and froze over. And those fish just stopped. So that progression off of the pre-spawn spots that I was telling you about, like, down towards Hickory Creek and all that, they kind of held up. Today, 2 days ago, we got that rain. And I knew it. I called it. I said, you know what? When this rain comes in, it's going to be warmer than the water that's in the lake. So it's like turning on a bath faucet.
Yeah.
And that warm water starts pumping in. And I told my buddies that I've had on my boat, I said, today's going to be the day that water is right. And sure enough, I've had some guys give me some really good reports today where it's been slacking. I think we caught 20 walleye in 30 days. These guys caught 17 in 4 hours today.
Yeah.
And it's just like the light switch just came on.
Conditions are right. And it's time to go. It makes sense.
So, that's pretty much on the spawn. What I would tell people is look early in the pre-spawn areas. You're going to find 25 to 35 foot holes that are in the White River Channel. You're going to have to rely on your graphs. Like I said, we could talk for 10 hours.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And also one more thing on the pre-spawn, the best bait for pre-spawn is a 5/16 ounce jig head with a bass minnow or a brood minnow. And you just pitch it out and just bounce it real slow, because when that water's under 50, those fish are not very active. You got to keep it right in front of them. And that's a deal where I show people on my trips. It's a bite. It's not, you would think with their teeth, these things are going to hammer it. They don't.
Yeah.
You're going along and all of a sudden there's some weight on there, and you got to know what that feels like.
It's kind of a lazy feeling. We've talked about that before. It feels like pulling up a wet sock. It's just like heavy, and you're like, did I hook a log? This thing's really not wiggling that much, but then it's just the slightest little wiggle. And it feels like, okay, I got a walleye.
Yep.
Do you have one of those baits in front of you?
Yeah.
So we can show the camera?
So the baits. Now I'm going to give you the secret, and everybody's going to be mad at me probably.
Worth the price of admission right here.
Yeah. This I told Kyle and Kyle, this is worth the price of admission. This is a bait that was made about 10 years ago, and it's very unique. It's a slow presentation swim bait, and I'll let you look at it too. The company's name is Authentex. Okay, it's AUTHENTX, and this is called a Pulsar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the reason why it's unique is you cannot fish it fast. You fish it faster than a mile an hour. This tail is it's a very good plastic. It doesn't rip off, but it's so thin that if you pull this faster than a mile an hour when you're reeling it in, this tail pins back and it doesn't do its deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So the other thing that's unique on that bait, and I can't tell you enough, if you're going to buy one early season plastic bait, look into those Authentex.
Mm-hmm.
You can get them at Bass Pro. You can get them on Tackle Warehouse, Fish USA. The other thing that bait does is it actually has a side wobble like a balsa Rapala.
Okay.
Where if you look at a Rapala going through the water, it has that side action.
Mm-hmm.
That bait right there, actually the way that's designed, has a side-to-side motion plus the tail giving its action.
Gotcha.
The thing on that is you fish that under a half mile an hour.
Slow.
Slow and slower yet. And the way they hit it. Now, the other thing that I do, and I am not sponsored by these guys. I'm sponsored by a couple companies, but these are not my guys. Walleye are very much in tune to scents. This scent comes out of Oregon, and it's called Procure. You can get it at Bass Pro. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that or not. It's Procure. It's 100% fish oils. They add a few additives to it, and they put some chartreuse in this one. And what you do is those ribbings that I was showing you on those, you just smear that in that ribbing, okay? And it stays a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do is you just cast this upstream, downstream, or whatever. If you got some current, you cast it up and then reel it in real slow. If you've got no current, I like to cast it downstream. And what you do is just, slow and you'll feel a tap. It's not a vicious strike.
It's not like a smallmouth.
Nope. It's just the way I describe it to people when I'm guiding them on the boat. I do this. It's just like this. It's just a tap.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get that tap, load it up.
Yeah.
It's not an aggressive. I always tell people with those teeth, you would think they would just destroy it.
Yeah, be monsters.
They don't.
Interesting.
And so that's my advice right there. And anybody that I've shown this to, the guys today that killed them were using these.
What kind of weight did you say on these?
I use a 5/16 ounce. It's a little bit more than a quarter, but you do have to vary that. So like if you're let's say you're up in the river and you've got some good current, you got you want to adjust that jig size.
Mm-hmm.
The least amount of weight on your jig head is the better. I mean, so the lighter the better. You don't want that thing just to plow down into the bottom and be stuck there.
Right.
You want it to just be going over the bottom.
But you are fishing over the bottom.
Yes.
That's another, like in the water column.
On the bottom.
People think fishermen, maybe not the average person thinking about water column, but there's different tactics to top of the water column, middle of the water column, and then bottom. Walleye are going to stick bottom of the water column.
Yep.
So you got to get what you're fishing down.
Yep. And for the most part, walleye there's all sorts of terms for them. I don't use them because, you hear people calling bass ditch pickles, and I have a lot more respect for bass than a ditch pickle. But anyways, they call them gravel lizards.
Okay.
I call them walleye.
They kind of got the look though of a gravel
They look
lizard.
and they like gravel.
Yeah.
And so gravel is where you're going to find them on the bottom. Every once in a while, they'll suspend. We've caught them in 60 to 100 feet of water and 35 feet of water, striper fishing with live shad in the middle of summer. So there are times where they suspend, but for the most part, they're on the bottom.
Yeah, for targeted approach.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep.
That's good. We've covered a little kind of staging and then pre-spawn, and then thinking about the lake and river arms and that kind of stuff. What's some necessary gear and tactics for middle of the spawn, kind of leaning towards post-spawn?
So what happens is, and they're really predictable. They'll come up and spawn. what you will find is the males stay behind for quite some time. Let's say as I know today, they're in there. They'll stay in there the males will stay in there for about 6 weeks. When the water gets at that right temperature, the females are going to dump their eggs. As soon as you get a rise, after they've dumped their eggs, the females go.
Rise in water temp or level?
Rise in water temp and level.
Okay, both.
So when you get a rise, so if you're up there and you're catching some walleye, and you're getting some females, you pull them up and you can tell they're full of eggs, and that goes to our conservation.
Mm-hmm.
I try to release them. If they're busting with eggs, I try to release them. It's not real sure on how many actually survive because the white has a lot of turbidity and a lot of silt that pretty much nicks. If the spawn was good, the water was right, and then 2 days later we get a big gully washer and trees and mud, it wipes them out. So that's another point. I told you we can get off on all sorts of stuff. But what happens is the females will bust out. So they get that rise. They've laid their eggs. They'll leave. The males stay there hoping for some girlfriends. So you'll catch a lot of shorts. You'll catch a lot of 17, 18. 18 is the minimum size you can keep. But you'll catch a lot of shorts after the females are gone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're aggressive. They're in there. So, don't give up on them. If you've caught them, let's say that you're not catching any bigger females because the females are going to be bigger.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be in that 20 to 25 inch range. The males are going to be from 16 to 19, 20. Okay. They will leave. And when they leave, they move back and they basically go backwards to where I was telling you.
At the pre-stage.
Pre-stage.
Yeah.
So they go from spawn back to pre-stage. And they'll sit out there and feed heavily. You give it about a week to 2 weeks after they've spawned, let them recoup energy and stuff, and then all of a sudden they'll go on a major feed.
And around here in the Ozarks, about what time is that? What time
That's
of month?
probably about the middle of April.
Okay.
To where the whole mass kind of starts heading out.
Yep.
Around the 1st of May, I start catching them all the way down at Prairie Creek and Rocky Branch.
Back in the lake.
Now, that doesn't mean that those fish came all the way up the river.
Right.
But a good point is people will say, hey, there was no fish here yesterday or like last week. And all of a sudden they say, well, we had that warm rain and now they're loaded. How can that be? Prairie Creek's a long ways away from Twin Bridges. And I had a guy tell me one time, he's still around. He's a good walleye fisher from North Dakota. And we talked about it. He goes, John, think about this. How far is it from here to Prairie Creek? And I said, I don't know, 30 miles. Maybe, And he says, all right, if a fish decides to move and they're going to, so we're talking about pre-spawn coming up the river. If a fish decides to move and he goes 2 miles an hour, which is walking speed, and he goes 24 hours straight, well, he can be 48 miles up the lake. So things happen fast.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can be here today, gone tomorrow, and vice versa. Not here today and here today.
Yeah. Things change.
And it changes fast. So.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is interesting and cool about you when we were starting to talk is because you do have the background and of being from Wisconsin and have grown up fishing for them up there, you know how to find them throughout the year. So a lot of people, they kind of just think walleye, that's like the spring thing. We do that. And then once the spawn is over, we're going to go back to smallmouth or largemouth.
Yeah, it's kind of a March, April fish.
Yeah. And so they kind of move on. But you were telling me you can catch walleye year round, right? Like you can stay on them.
So, yeah. So some of my secrets, the spawn's great, but the post spawn is even better.
Really?
Most people don't know that. Like you say, they put their rods away, they go do whatever they're doing, chasing
I've definitely
spots or smallies or
shooting turkeys.
It's hard being an outdoorsman here
is.
because turkey season kind of gets smack dab in the middle
it's
of all
right
this
there in
stuff.
it.
Yeah, it's bad news when you're guiding and I'm doing owl hoots and the gobblers are busting off the top of the ridges out there. I'm
Yeah.
going, man, maybe we should go hunting instead of fishing. But,
Y'all want to get out here?
so what happens, you were asking me what they do. So they kind of come back, they get in those pre-spawn areas for a period of time, not long. You can hit them. You hit them in those areas that you got them on the way up. You get them on the way back, and then all of a sudden they disappear. And that goes back to how fast they can move. So what happens is your water starts getting a lot warmer. They're a northern fish. So you start going around the 1st of May, we can get that water temperature up in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Warm water, and these are things I teach people too. People don't think a lot about fish. The more you know about fish, it's just like deer. The more you understand how a deer comes in to feed and when he feeds and the moon's out and he's nocturnal, same thing with walleye. So once you understand why they're getting out of here, the reason why they get out of here is the river arms, when that water gets hot water doesn't hold as much oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Cold water holds much more oxygen. When you start losing that oxygen levels, the stripers leave. They come up just like the walleye do, but everything starts backing back out towards about the highway 12 bridge to the dam.
Yeah.
And what they do is they will load up. I mean, they will literally load up on points. Any point, and this is why you need a good graph. I tell people, people always ask, hey, what kind of boat do I need? I don't have a lot of money. I said, buy a cheap boat, but spend all your money on a good graph and a good trolling motor. Because you can catch a lot of fish out of a 16-foot John boat with the right electronics and the right trolling motor.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a $150,000 bass boat and you have no clue what's going on, and you zip up and down the lake at 90 miles an hour, and you don't catch as many fish.
Yeah.
I caught more fish as a kid in a 16-foot 9.9 Evinrude
Mm-hmm.
because I had to fish when I launched my boat. I couldn't run all the way to the dam and then run all the way up to the Highway 45 bridge. But those fish will get, and why you need a good graph is because you want to look at your graph and you want to find main lake points that are adjacent to the main river channel. And I tell that to people and they go, what do you mean? Well, this was a dammed river. That river's still there. And that's how those fish use that as a highway to get to Twin Bridges. And they use it all the way back to get back to the cooler water in the summertime.
Yep.
So what you want to do is find main lake points that are in about 25 foot of water. That's an important number. Now, this is coming back to the graph. One of the things I teach people is in the summertime, that lake has a thermocline. It's an important concept because where that thermocline sets up, and you can learn what it looks like on a graph. You have somebody that knows what it looks like, or me, or somebody, and say, that's the thermocline. And when you see that thermocline at 25 to 30 feet, that is the most ideal oxygen levels in the whole lake. So the thermocline is a very important thing. It's very important on stripers. It's very important on bass. It's very important on walleye. So if I go out and I launch at Rocky Branch and I start going out and I start seeing that thermocline and I look at it and I tell the people on my boat, I said, look that's your thermocline. It's at 27 feet deep. What we're going to do is we're going to look for main lake points that have adjacent to the main river channel, so it drops off fast. And we're going to start trolling our either we're trolling crawler harnesses. That gets to what you were asking me, how you catch them. Either your crawler harnesses, or I've got another method that I use called the 50+2 method, where you can troll cranks. We can talk about those. Like I say, this show could go on for 2 days.
Yeah. What's a crawler harness?
So a crawler harness is what we use a lot. I am sponsored by a company called Max Smile Blades. I don't know if you can see it from there. That's a smile blade. That's an 1.5 inch smile blade. And what you do is you construct a crawler harness. And it's and I can give you the gist of it. We could actually, at some point in time, maybe post them on Instagram or something and show people how to build one.
Yeah.
And what you do is you've got a weight on the bottom, use a 3-way swivel. You run a leader off of there, and it gets back to how beaver's a tough lake. You want to use fluorocarbon. You don't want to use really high test, strong test, because on that end up there, when you got 25%, 25 feet visibility,
They're going to see it.
they're going to see it.
Yeah.
So what I do a little bit differently, we can talk about that on the next deal, is long leaders. A lot of guys use 4 or 5 foot. So they'll have their 3-way. They'll run a bottom, and I'm just going to say this is a bottom. This is actually a 50+2 rig. But you'll use a bottom bouncer weight. You tie it off that 3-way, and then you have your leader come off, and you put your smile blade on there, a couple beads, and then you put a hook.
Yeah. We may have to do a visual of this because I'm trying to map this out in my brain.
I can do it. I don't know how fast.
You don't have to do it right here. Maybe we can do it after. We can put it on Instagram or something.
And we can show it.
Yeah.
I'll show how I build them.
Yeah.
I can show how you save some money. But what you do is, if you follow the concept, you've got your weight, you've got your other 3-way, and you've got your leader. You got your spinner, and then you have your hook.
Mm-hmm.
You take a half a night crawler, you bust it in half. You don't need a whole night crawler. You put it on that hook. You drop that, and usually it's about a 2-ounce weight. Drop that down behind the boat, and it's a slow, ungodly slow pace, but it's very productive.
Yeah.
And when it's 95 degrees out and you got 85-year-old men on there, I'm telling them you better be hydrated because you're going about a half mile to a mile an hour dragging this bottom bouncer.
You're just crawling.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what happens is we find the fish on the graph, and what we do is we use our graph to very much pinpoint a track that will circumnavigate that thermocline, because those fish are going to be right there. So even though that point comes down past 30, goes down to 100, 25 to 27 is that range where those fish are going to be.
Right. So you can set your boat to crawl around that point and stay in the same.
I do.
Yeah, the same zone.
And with my graphs, I can set it, and it will follow contours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you don't have that, you just have to be cognizant of your graph and know, like if you two are fishing, you got to say, hey, we got to stay in 25 foot of water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you're going to do is you just bounce that around. You drop that behind the boat. You let out enough line. You want to make sure you're having contact with the bottom, and you're and this is just an abbreviated way it works.
Right.
And so you go along. I like to put my finger on the line. You can feel that weight hitting the bottom. And what will happen is it's kind of the same bite as one of these Authentics. You're going along, and all of a sudden, you got some heaviness on your line. And what you have to do, and this is where a guide comes in very, very handy. If you're a bass fisherman, I get them on the boat, and I have to tell them, we're not bass fishing. We're walleye fishing. I'll say, hey,
they
whoa,
miss a
whoa.
lot of bites.
Yeah, I'll say, whoa, Jimmy Houston, relax, because you just missed it. What happens is walleye are interesting because they, under mutation, genetics, learning how to survive, what they'll do is they'll come up and they'll hit that crawler, and then they'll let off. You'll feel some weight on there, and they'll swim with you. And how I know this is we've had cameras that watches what happens. Myself and other people. They come up and they hit it, and they let go, and they follow it. They'll come up and hit it again. And what they do is walleye will flare one side of a gill plate to turn the bait. They eat a lot of bluegill. And I think it's just through us, through learning, through evolution, they've learned that they have to flare that fish around so that they swallow it in the correct manner.
So spines aren't getting them
You
all the way
don't
down.
want to be spined. I have caught walleye with bluegills lodged in their throat.
Yeah.
It's probably not good for them.
Probably not.
And if so what they do, so when you get that initial hit, this is the hard part, is you get that initial weight on there and people think, I think I got a bite, because a snag will not move with the boat. So you're moving, let's say, 0.8 miles an hour. And you got weight on your line, And all of a sudden, the guy's looking at you going, yeah, it's heavier. And I said, yeah, well, that's not a snag because it's coming with the boat. We've already moved 10 feet, unless you're dragging a branch, which has happened.
Sure.
But what you do is when you feel that weight, you feed it back to him. I call it feeding back. You have to feed the crawler harness back. So now you got to picture this in your mind's eye. I'm dropping back. The boat is moving forward. And when the boat catches up with the drop back, so once it starts pulling the jig again, the crawler harness, then what you do is you come forward slow. Not up high, but let's say this is the side of the boat. You come along the side of the boat.
You're like parallel with the water.
Parallel with the water and right at the gunnel of the boat. And you come, and if you still feel that heaviness, you set the hook. Now, this is a key. I should write a book on it, walleye fishing for dummies. The key is you don't turn around and do a bass set straight up in the air, because that fish has turned his head. And if you go straight up, you're going to miss a lot of fish. It doesn't mean you're not going to hook some, but you're going to miss a lot of them. What you do is, and if you watch professional walleye anglers, they sweep set it. So you feed it back, you come forward, and if the boat's still moving, like I say, you got to understand the concepts. And the bait still has the line still has some load up on it. That's when you set the hook.
Yeah. For those who are listening more than those watching on YouTube, imagine a baseball player, and the drag back across the boat parallel is the bottom half of the baseball bat swing, and the sweep set it does like what it sounds like, but it's the follow through of the bat, not over your shoulder, but that initial like when it's making contact with the ball. Is that
very good?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
set. You were doing that. I was like, it's like baseball.
Heck, man, you come
Y'all
work
American
for me.
Fish.
Quit this job, man. You come fishing with me. No, that's a good point, and that's what I try to do with people. Like I told you when I met you, I'm very thorough.
Yeah,
I want you to understand water, clarity, temperatures, why fish do what they do. You get these guys on the boat. Let's say you guys come. Let's say Kyle's been with me on a crawler harness trip, and he's caught a couple fish. He felt that bite. He set that hook. I guarantee you, he will outfish you 10-1. You'll be going along over the same marks, same depth, same speed, same color blade. He's catching fish and you're not. And until you get that and so that's a good tip for somebody. Don't give up. Just because you go out and you don't catch one, you're probably getting hits. You just got to listen to what I'm telling you and just keep at it. And pretty soon you're going to catch one. And you're going to go, aha, that's a walleye. And then, boy, once that light comes on, people are going, then pretty soon you guys are neck and neck.
Yeah, it's a total feel thing. It's like a lot of things that we do, it's you got to do it once, kind of experience that, and then you know what it feels like, and then you can really kind of repeat that success because you've been there before. Let me ask you this, and then we're gonna jump over and talk another topic and get into more multi-species stuff because crappie season's coming up, and we're gonna talk about that. But before we move on, I want to ask you this. What is the most common mistake you see people make that they could do this maybe one thing differently and they'll improve their success with walleye?
Okay, so with walleye, the average angler is gonna. So this is the number one, I think. You go up in the river arms, and I see it all the time. People come busting by me I have clients on the boat, and I'm telling these guys, they're going way too fast. This lure right here is a firetail flicker shad, number 5. It's a deadly walleye lure. They make them in a 7, a 5. One's bigger, one dives deeper, depending on what your depth is. If you're going upstream and that water is under 50 degrees, you got to understand the lure is moving because of the current. Don't be busting upstream at 2.3 miles an hour. For some reason, everybody thinks 2.3 on flicker shad is the key. The key is when that water's under 50 55, you want to slow that down. You want to troll upriver, and you want to troll slow. About 1.5 miles an hour.
Yeah. So slow down.
Slow down. People are going way too fast. When that water gets above 55, you can go 2 to 3 miles an hour and they'll nail it.
Mm-hmm.
That warm water gets them excited. But when it's cold, we'll go up there and we'll kill them on the Authentics. We'll kill them on flicker shad, but you got to be going slow. So on walleye, and the third thing is they're there.
Yeah.
Go early. Don't wait until everybody's catching them.
Yeah.
Because we're catching them when no one's out there.
Yeah. I like that.
That's good. We've gone high level and then jumped into some like really specific and in-depth tactics. The thing that I get excited about for the guy who's maybe doesn't have a boat, trying to figure it out, just wants to go fish a river, you can use these tactics, especially that we've talked about here at the end of the flicker shad and say that other ribbed one again. The
Authentics.
Authentics.
Yeah, it's an Authentics pulsar.
You can get on the riverbank in some of these staging areas and cast downstream.
All right, with this too.
With any type of crankbait, but the ones you're looking at, and reel it in slow.
Oh yeah,
and catch fish. Like we do that every spring.
We've done that,
which is really really fun.
Oh, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that I understand the more anglers we get into fishing, the better off fishing's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, we got a lot of pressure on beaver right now, and that's something we're going to talk about later on.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going to show you this too. This is a Mega Bass 110+1. So the guy on the bank, if I was going to tell somebody, hey, you're going to go off the bank, you can throw these off the bank, works fine. Flicker shad work fine, but if I was going to go off the bank and do anything, or a kayak or something like that, these 110+1 Mega Basses, they're expensive as all get out. They work. They're $24 a piece. They work.
Oh boy.
Yeah, you don't. If you lose one, you want to make sure that water's warm enough so you can go swim in and get it, or send your good buddy in to get it for you.
Yep.
Give him $5 or something. I mean, this is a great bait too. So,
Yeah,
and that's early season jerk baits.
Okay.
So.
I like it. We covered a lot on walleye. This next episode that y'all will hear next week is going to be crappie.
That's right.
Like Kyle said, crappie season is also right around the corner. I'm sure we'll touch kind of just general species, but we will pivot a little bit. If there is more walleye content you would like to consume, what's the best way for them to consume it from you?
They can look at my Facebook page. I do write for the Arkansas Game and Fish.
Okay.
Every Thursday that comes out. Get on the email blast. They'll send you a report. They come from all lakes in Arkansas. I write the one for Beaver. My Facebook page is FishOn Guides, NWA.
FishOn Guides, NWA.
Yep. And go on there and like it, and you'll see. And I do reports on there, just like we're talking here. I just don't post a picture. Sometimes I'll post techniques, and this is what we're doing.
That's great. Okay. John,
good.
thank you very much. Next episode, like I said, we'll be covering some crappie. We're also going to talk about a giveaway at the end of next episode. So y'all stay tuned for that one. Thanks for listening. Share this with a buddy who needs to catch a walleye, needs to learn how to catch a walleye, is interested in catching a walleye.
And doesn't believe me that walleye might taste better than crappie.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to catch heat for that.
And even if it's just going on the bank and throwing something downstream, it's fun. Get out there and enjoy the weather. It's warming up, and we'll catch you next week.